Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinatha Sharma Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai, Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai, Mathura Dham Ki Jai, Ganga Mai Ki Jai, Jamuna Mai Ki Jai, Bhakti Devi Ki Jai, Tulsi Maharani Ki Jai, Samaveda Bhaktarinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Shri Guru and Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Awaz kam kar do. Today we're starting a new chapter entitled Breaking Ground from Volume 2 of Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita by His Holiness Satsvarup Das Goswami. We're also going to start incorporating new books because this is the time when several of Srila Prabhupada's first disciples met Prabhupada, and after Srila Prabhupada left this world, they began to write their memories. This is a book written by Brahmananda Swami called Swamiji. This is a book written by Gargamuni Swami called Gargamuni. That's what Prabhupada used to call him. And today we're going to read from a very special book written by the first devotee who met Prabhupada walking on the street when Prabhupada just got the 26 Second Avenue storefront. His name is Hayagriva. He was an English professor at one university. So we'll start reading. You see, Satsvarup Maharaj, he took a quotation, and that's from when Srila Prabhupada, although he translated the entire Bhagavad Gita with a purport for every one of the 700 slokas, the first time it was printed in America, it was going to be 800 pages. But the publishing house, which was Macmillan, a very big house, publishing house, they wanted to publish it in 250 pages only. That means practically 1/3 of the size that it should have been. So it had to be cut down. And Prabhupada asked Allen Ginsberg, who was a very famous poet amongst the young people in those days, to write the introduction. So this chapter, called Breaking Ground, begins with a portion of that introduction of the Bhagavad Gita written by Allen Ginsberg. Swami Bhaktivedanta came to USA and went swiftly to the archetype spiritual neighborhood, the New York Lower East Side, and installed intact an ancient, perfectly preserved piece of street India. He adorned a storefront as his ashram and adored Krishna therein, and by patience and good humor, singing, chanting, and expounding Sanskrit terminology, day by day, established Krishna consciousness in the psychedelic, mind-manifesting center of America East. To choose to attend to the Lower East Side, what kindness and humility and intelligence. So that was written by Allen Ginsberg from his introduction to the Macmillan Bhagavad Gita as it is. Now, we will be hearing about Allen Ginsberg quite a bit since Srila Prabhupada moved to 26 Second Avenue, which was where all of the hip young people were living at that time. And he, being one of the leaders of the counterculture generation, he wrote poems, and actually his lifestyle was the antithesis, the exact opposite of what Srila Prabhupada was trying to establish. he took intoxication. He engaged in all types of illicit sex life. And he advocated these things in his writings. But because he had visited India and he had heard the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra there, and he had met some holy persons, when he met Srila Prabhupada, he was very much attracted to him and wanted to help him in his mission. And he gave a great deal of help to Srila Prabhupada. We'll read in the coming chapters all of the help that he gave. So we have a little bit here on the bottom. This is Allen Ginsberg. And especially, not only in New York, but when Prabhupada went to the epicenter of the hippie culture in San Francisco, Allen Ginsberg arranged for Prabhupada's reception at the airport by bringing hundreds of hippies there to greet him. He then arranged at the Avalon Hall for the big music concert, which was for donations to begin a temple in San Francisco. So he was really one of Prabhupada's #1 supporters. And when Prabhupada needed a visa extension, because he was going to have to leave America, Allen Ginsberg personally went to Washington to speak to a congressman to get Prabhupada's extension. So he really felt that Prabhupada was going to help the young people of America and the world. Swami Bhaktivedanta came to USA and went swiftly to the archetype spiritual neighborhood, the New York Lower East Side, and installed, so this is what I just read, and the picture is there. This is Prabhupada and Allen Ginsberg meeting together, discussing the Krishna consciousness movement in the Swami's Frederick Street apartment in San Francisco, which was the second temple that Prabhupada established. Allen Ginsberg's endorsement helped establish the Krishna consciousness movement within New York's Bohemian culture. Ginsberg was also involved with Krishnaism. He had started incorporating chanting the Hare Krishna mantra into his religious practice in the mid-1960s. After learning that A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, the founder of the Hare Krishna movement in the Western world, had rented a storefront in New York, he befriended him, visiting him often and suggesting publishers for his books, and a fruitful relationship began. This relationship is documented by Satsvarup Das Goswami in his biographical account, Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita. Ginsberg donated money, materials, and his reputation to help the Swami establish the first temple, and toured with him to promote his cause. Despite disagreeing with many of Bhaktivedanta Swami's required prohibitions, which was particularly intoxication and illicit sex, Ginsberg often sang the Hare Krishna mantra publicly as part of his philosophy and declared that it brought a state of ecstasy. He was glad that Bhaktivedanta Swami, an authentic Swami from India, was now trying to spread the chanting in America. So I remember also what Allen Ginsberg would do was he would have big demonstrations and programs and poetic readings in colleges, in parks, wherever he was invited. And I remember he once came to this city where I lived, and in a huge park, you could hear all over the park him chanting Hare Krishna with his harmonium. So this is the way he started all of his programs. He had a true affinity to this chanting of Hare Krishna, which he felt could bring spiritual ecstasy. And therefore, when he met Prabhupada, he supported Prabhupada very much in the chanting of Hare Krishna, although their lifestyles were quite different. Prabhupada's new neighborhood was not as run down as the nearby Bowery, though it certainly was less than quaint. Right across from his storefront A row of tombstones looked out from the somber, dimly lit display windows of Weitzner Brothers and Papper memorials. So in America, since most of the people are Christian, here you have the Muslims, they have qabristans, where they bury their dead. They don't cremate them. And in the Judaic, in the Abrahamic religions, that means Judaism, Christianity, and Mohammedanism. Those three religions are coming from the same forefather, just like our forefather might be considered to be Veda Vyas, someone like that. So these three religions, they do not cremate their bodies at the time of death. They bury them. And in America, hundreds and hundreds of acres are dedicated to these burial sites. They're called cemeteries. And wherever a body is buried, they have a big stone with the person's name engraved and some little something about their, like a little saying about their life and their dates, when they were born, when they died, where, everything like that. It's like a little monument, like a mini samadhi for each person. Millions and millions of these. So Prabhupada's storefront was right at the area of the city where one shop after another was that made these stones, these tombstones. And that was what Prabhupada's storefront was looking out to, quite dismal. In fact, Prabhupada once asked the devotees to go over and ask if these tombstone carvers could make deities. They said, no, we only make tombstones, that's all. Because they're made out of fine granite, usually. North of Weitzner Brothers, that was one of the tombstone memorial places, was Sam's Luncheonette. Next to Sam's stood an ancient four-story building marked AIR. So AIR we heard about in the Bowery, Artist in Residence. Then Ben J. Horowitz monuments, more gravestones. And finally, Schwartz's funeral home. So the funeral home was there. That's where they brought the dead bodies. And then as the dead bodies were brought there and prepared, they have a whole entombing. They put makeup on the face and dress up the body very nicely with nice hair all in place and their finest dresses. Decorating dead bodies, that's what a funeral home is. So, and then just next door are the tombstone places where they carve the stones. So it was that whole area of death right there. On the next block at number 43, a worn canvas awning jutted out onto the sidewalk. Provenzano Lanza Funeral Home. Then there was Cosmos Parcels, importers, and a few blocks further uptown, the prominent black and white signboard of the Village East Theater. And at the Village East Theater, they used to show avant-garde movies and dramas and things like that. So we have here, that is 2nd Avenue. And this cross is First Street. And this red cross is where the opening of Mattress Gift Shop is. And then there's the white thing. That's the little courtyard with the bushes that Prabhupada would walk across. And then just behind that is where Prabhupada's apartment was, on the 2nd floor. In India, we have ground floor and first floor. In America, they don't call it ground floor, it's called first floor. So 2nd floor there is our first floor, like what this is. And then down here we have a bigger section because that is where 26 2nd Avenue is. And we're going to read on today about the meeting of Hayagriva Professor Howard Wheeler with Prabhupada. And Hayagriva and Kirtanananda, that's Keith and Howard, they had gone on a pilgrimage to India. They were thoroughly disillusioned. They couldn't find a guru. And they came back, and they moved into this place here on what's called Mott Street. So they were just near to Prabhupada. And fatefully, by Krishna's arrangement, Hayagriva met Prabhupada as he was walking on Houston Street, and Prabhupada invited him, and that was how many of the first devotees came to meet Prabhupada. Up a block, but on the same side of the avenue as the storefront, was the Church of the Nativity, an old 3-story building as a Christian church, with new blue paint and a gold-colored cross on top. The 6-story 26 Second Avenue, its face covered by a greenish fire escape, there you go, crouched against the massive 9-story Knickerbocker fireproof warehouse. So here, this is the storefront, and this is the little, this is a little courtyard, and these are the apartment buildings. So entrance would be from here. Second Avenue was a main traffic artery for East Manhattan, and the stoplight at the intersection of Houston and Second pumped a stream of delivery trucks, taxis, and private autos past Prabhupada's door. From early morning until night, there would be cars zooming by, followed by the sound of brakes, the competitive tension of waiting bumper to bumper, the impetuous honking, then gears grinding, engines rumbling and revving, and again the zooming by. The traffic was distractingly heavy. So all over New York City, because of the dense population, anyone who lives there, if you're living on a main road like what Prabhupada was, Second Avenue, constant 24 hours a day, there's traffic. Now here we have noise in Vrindavan in the daytime, and there's peacefulness at night. New York never sleeps. It's a city that never sleeps. The cars are constantly moving, honking, brakes screeching, and all day, all night, that's what you hear in New York City. At 26 Second Avenue, there were actually 2 storefronts. The one to the north was a coin laundromat. We saw pictures of a laundromat in Butler, Pennsylvania. That's where the people go in and wash their laundry, and so many different laundry machines and dryers. So that's what was next to Prabhupada's matchless gift shop. And the one to the south had been a gift shop, but was now vacant. Both had narrow entrances, large display windows, and dull paint. Beneath the matchless gift sign was a window, 6 feet square, that a few weeks before had displayed matchboxes decorated with photos of movie stars of the 30s and 40s. The sign, Matchless Gifts, was the only remaining memento of the nostalgic gift shop that had recently moved out. So the artist who had that matchless gift shop, he used to make gifts out of empty matchboxes and out of matches, all different things, and put pictures of old movie stars, just little antique type things. So his business didn't go very well, therefore he moved out. Below the shop's window, a pair of iron doors in the sidewalk hid stone steps to the cellar and boiler room. So because we've heard before, in New York City, there's no greenery. It's just cement pavements and then the asphalt, the black tar roads. And in the pavements, because it gets so cold in New York City, they have to have heating 6 months out of the year. And the heating is done with oil or coal or steam. The oil, they make the oil burn, and then that creates steam. So they have these doors, iron doors on the pavements that open up, and there's staircases going down into the basements. And in the basements are the big boilers where they have the oil that creates the steam. The steam goes up, and they have these radiators that make heat in the rooms, because otherwise people would just freeze to death. It's so cold there in New York City, way, way below freezing for many months out of the year. The wide sidewalk had been laid down in sections of various shapes and sizes at different times, years past. Certain sections had cracked or caved in, and a fine dust with tiny sparkling shards of glass had collected in the cracks and depressions. A dull black fire hydrant stood on the curb. So this has now become mandatory in India as well, that you have to have fire systems here. We have them here in our temple. We have these red pipes. Maybe you've not noticed them. These are water lines, so that in case there's a fire, and there was a fire several years ago, and that's why we had to get all these things. They were storing the deity's flowers for one of the festivals in Sanak Sanatan's office, just next to the Balaram Hall, and they kept the air conditioner on to keep the flowers fresh overnight. And there was a short circuit, and a fire started. Nobody knew because the room was all locked up. So every single thing in the room burnt up. So after that, we called the fire company and installed all of this fire system. So in America, it's mandatory. And on the streets, they have these fire hydrants, they're about this big, and you open it up, and when the fire engines come, they put their hose there, and automatically there's water everywhere. It's a whole sprinkler system in case of fire, because if there's a fire in one building, whole blocks can get caught on fire. Midway between the entrances to the two storefronts was the main entrance to number 26. This door opened into a foyer lined with mailboxes and intercoms. So intercoms means it's quite an advanced system, because it was a 6-story building. That means there were many apartments above the Matchless Gift Shop. So you couldn't just go upstairs. You weren't allowed to do that. You press a button, and the person upstairs, they'll say, "Who is it?" And then you answer who it is, and then they'll press a buzzer in their house, in their apartment, that allows the door to open. It's a whole system of security, so that people can't just enter, because otherwise there would be so much theft, especially in that area of the city. And then a locked inner door opened into a hallway leading to the stairs or back to the courtyard. Now you remember in the Bowery there was no such system. And the drunkards at the place where Prabhupada lived, at night when it was cold, they would just open up the door and sleep in the hallway and pass urine there and vomit and everything right in the hallway. So Prabhupada had moved up a bit by moving into 26 Second Avenue. There was a security system, and it was a little more dignified. To the left of the gift shop's window was its front door, a dark wooden, let's see if I have that picture. No. Maybe have it. There, that's the dark door. A dark wooden frame holding a full-length pane of glass. The door opened into the long, narrow storefront, which was now completely bare. Just inside, to the right of the door, A platform extending beneath the display window was just the proper height for a seat. So where this picture of Panchatattva, that's sitting on top of that display window, it's like a long bench. And we used to also keep pots of tilak there, so that anyone who came in, they could put their tilak on there with a mirror. But we didn't have real tilak. We had something that, it was called fuller's earth. It was a kind of clay that was used by artists. And we'd have to go to the art shops to get it. And it made a very soft, it looked like Gopi Chandan, but it was the best we could get in America, just like we couldn't get tulsi beads. So we'd have to go to the craft shops and buy wooden beads. Okay. At the far end of the bare, dingy room, so that's entrance, and then the far end of the bare, dingy room, two grimy paned windows covered with bars opened into the courtyard. To the left of the left-hand window was a small sink fixed to the outside of a very small toilet closet. I might have that picture here. Yes, so there are the windows behind where Prabhupada sat, and just to this side was the sink and the small toilet room. Fixed to the outside of a very small toilet closet, whose door faced the front of the store. So the first devotees who moved in, which was Gargamuni, Brahmananda, and a few others, there was no place for them to shower. There was only a toilet. And they didn't want to bother Srila Prabhupada in his upstairs rooms. So at the sink, they would wash themselves, that's all. That's the only facility they had. A door on the store's left wall connected to a hallway that led into the courtyard. The courtyard was paved with concrete geometric sections and encircled with shrub gardens and tall trees. There was a picnic table, a cement bird bath, and a bird house on a pole, and near the center of the courtyard were two shrub gardens. The courtyard was bordered north and south by high walls, and front and back by the two tenements. The patch of sky above gave relief. Overlooking the courtyard from the rear building of 26 2nd Avenue was Prabhupada's second-floor apartment, where he would now live, work, and worship. With help from his Bowery friends, he had cleaned and settled into his new home. In the back room, his office, he had placed against one wall a thin cushion with an elephant print cover, and in front of the cushion his unpainted metal suitcase. So that was the same suitcase that Prabhupada brought from India, and he used that as a desk, which served as a desk. He had set his typewriter on the desk and his papers and books on either side. This became his work area. His manuscripts bundled in saffron cloth, his stock of Srimad Bhagavatams, and his few personal effects he kept in the closet opposite his desk. So when we also came here and we found all of Prabhupada's manuscripts at the Radha Damodar temple, and then when we opened up Prabhupada's Elmira, we found so many papers also. So we were told to put them into, Prabhupada would tie the papers in red cloth, tie them up very tightly. They said that keeps the bugs out, keeps the bugs from eating up the paper. On the wall above his sitting place, he hung an Indian calendar print of Lord Krishna. Krishna, as a youth, was playing on his flute with the cow close behind him. Lord Krishna was standing on the planet Earth, which curved like the top of a small hill beneath his feet. There were 2 windows on the east wall, and the dappled morning sunlight, filtering in through the fire escape, fell across the floor. So again, each building had to have outside of the building a whole set of staircases, so that if there was a fire, people could jump out of the windows and walk down these staircases. So just from experience, the whole city, because everything was so compact, and if there was a fire in one building, it would spread everywhere. They had so much security to prevent fires and deaths that way. The next room was bare, except for a fancy coffee table, which became Prabhupada's altar. Here he placed a framed picture of Lord Chaitanya and his associates. On the wall he hung an Indian calendar print of 4-armed Lord Vishnu and Ananta Shesha, the celestial snake. And as in the Bowery loft, he put up a clothesline. Both rooms were freshly painted, and the floors were clean hardwood parquet. Now here in India, you don't usually have wooden houses. They're made out of bricks, because they make bricks right here. So that's sensible. Whatever's, for instance, if you go to Orissa, their houses are made out of stones because they have stones there. And if each part of the country that you go to, way up north, they have wooden houses. But here there's no wood, so they can't make wooden houses. But in America, there were so many forests, so they make their houses out of wood, and they have wooden floors, and that was why they had to be very careful because of fire. And when Prabhupada did the first Agnihotra, the first initiations, the neighbors called the fire company because they thought there was a fire. The bathroom was clean and serviceable, as was the narrow furnished kitchen. Prabhupada would sometimes stand by the kitchen window, gazing beyond the courtyard wall. He had moved here without any prospects of paying the next month's rent. So Prabhupada at that time, according to his diary, he had $200 to his name. So Carl and Michael, they paid for the first month's rent, which came to about $175 for the 2 places. And then Prabhupada didn't know where the money was going to come for the next month. Although Carl, Mike, Carol, James, Bill, and others, remember Bill, he was the one who worked at the Paradox restaurant, he informed everybody about Prabhupada, and now that Prabhupada was moving, he also informed everybody, had encouraged him to move here. Some of them now found it a little inconvenient to visit him regularly, but they all wished him well and hoped new people would come here to help him. They felt that this location was the best yet, and he seemed more comfortable here. At the Paradox, Bill would spread the word of Swamiji's new address. So I'm just going to read for another 5 minutes here because we still have 15 minutes left of Satsvarup Maharaj's video. And then next week, Mukunda Maharaj said that he's going to send his video. We'll see. Okay, so this is, here, we have to go back here. So this is Hayagriva's memories when he first met Prabhupada, and this was very, very instrumental for filling up the storefront with new people because his old friends wished him well, but it was a little too far for them to come regularly anymore. Visitor from Calcutta. This is from the book called The Hare Krishna Explosion by Hayagriva Das, Howard Wheeler. I first see him just after crossing the Bowery at Houston Street. As he passes before the iron mesh fence of a playground, I distinctly glimpse the aura of saintliness. I watch him through the rushing traffic and stumbling derelicts. Derelicts means drunkards. He strolls almost jauntily down the sidewalk. He is an old man whom age has never touched. Aloof from the people and bustle about him, he walks proudly, independently, his hand in a cloth bead bag. He wears the saffron robes of a sannyasi, and on his feet are quaint, pointed white shoes. Only 7 months ago, I had seen many saffron-robed monks and holy men walking the dirt roads of Hardwar and Rishikesh, and stopping beside the Ganges to bathe. For me, that had been a futile journey to the mystic East in search of the all-knowing Guru. But now, what's this? I looked again at the pointed white shoes. Did this man follow me all the way from North India? Or did he just suddenly descend from the clouds onto Manhattan sidewalks? I decide I must speak to him. As I start across the street, trucks rumbling toward Holland Tunnel block him from my view. I look again to make sure that he's still there. Yes, he even appears to be aware of me. He has all the bearings of a great actor in a famous movie. I can't think of what to say, but I approach him anyway. We both stop at once. His sudden smile is moonlight in the gray July smog. Are you from India? I ask stupidly. Oh yes, he says, his eyes bright and expressive. Crosstown buses roar past, billowing exhaust like clouds of incense. I sense that his tranquility is fixed in something far beyond the traffic roar. And you, he asks? I'm American, I say, but I just got back from Calcutta. Acha, Calcutta, another smile. I am coming from Calcutta. And you were liking India? Yes, well, it's very different. And Vrindavan, have you been to Vrindavan? No, I say, where's that? Near Mathura, he says. I'm afraid not, I say, not knowing either place. I got sick and had to leave. A poor excuse, but I can think of nothing else. His large brown eyes sparkle. How old is he? His head is shaved, save for a few white hairs in back, and his complexion, golden Bengali, seems radiant against saffron robes. His presence evokes quiet ashrams nestled near the Himalayas, cows, bells, temples, and holy rivers. But I like India, I add. I'm interested in Hindu philosophy. Someday I'll go back. You are living near here, he asks? 2 blocks down. I point across Bowery, over on Mott Street. Then we are neighbors, he says. I want to give some classes on Bhagavad Gita. I have this one place. I wonder if it's suitable. Maybe you can come and see? Of course, I say, and we turn and walk the half block to 2nd Avenue. We stop before a small storefront between 1st and 2nd Streets, next door to a mobile filling station, a gas station, petrol pump, and across the street from the Red Star Bar and Gonzalez Funeral Home. Occupying half the ground floor of a 4-story apartment building, the storefront had evidently served as a curio shop, that's a gift shop, for the words matchless gifts were painted over the front door. I notice an announcement in the window. Lectures on Bhagavad Gita, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 7 to 9 p.m. A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami. So, he's a Swami. This is a good area, he asks. Oh yes, I say, it surely is. Suddenly I feel sorry for the grandfatherly gentleman, so far from home, so helpless in such an alien metropolis. Metropolis means big city. I would like to hear your lectures, I say. Then you must come, he says. Another moonlight smile. I have friends too, I add, who might be interested. Yes, very good. You must bring them. I will, I promise. Monday evening. When I returned to my dark, cockroach-ridden apartment on Mott Street, oh, the cockroaches. When I first went to the New York temple, you opened up the door and never will, the cockroaches, they cover the entire walls. They just live on the walls, they eat the walls. And you can't get rid of them. There are too many of them. The cockroach-ridden apartment on Mott Street, I tell everyone about the new Swami. So Hayagriva, Howard, he was living with a group of friends, which is what they did in those days, like communes, like 9 people in, one little apartment. I tell everyone about the new Swami. We are all in our 20s. Keith and Wally, so Keith became Kirtananda, that's his picture, and Wally became Umapati. Umapati was one of Prabhupada's first disciples. He preached in China a lot. And he also went to France. He did a lot of preaching in the early days. Are the most interested. Where is he from? Calcutta. Maybe he followed us back, Keith suggests, to a 2nd Avenue storefront? Just 2 blocks away. He wonders if it's a good neighborhood. The Bowery? What's he teaching? Bhagavad Gita. Now that should be interesting. Is he a guru or avatar or what? Swami, guru, who knows? Well, let's go Monday and find out. Just what we need, Wally says, another guru. Maybe he was sending out all those strange vibes in India, Keith says. Maybe, I say. Anyway, let's try him. So now Howard, in his book, I guess I should show the movie now so that we finish it and we can go on with this next week. Just a second. Prabhu Kahai? प्रभु जी वीडियो दिखा हाँ मिल गया ठीक है हाँ
and being initiated. Another thing that happened during that summer was we got an invitation from the United Nations to attend a peace prayer vigil. Different religious groups were gathering in front of the United Nations building and saying prayers for peace. So we, as a religious group, were invited, and the Swamiji wanted to take the opportunity. All the boys went by bus up to the UN building, and Prabhupada got a ride in a car. It was a beautiful summer morning, and I still remember Swamiji standing up and giving a lecture and the breeze blowing his robes. And he gave a lecture about the peace formula, how there can't be peace unless you accept Krishna as the proprietor and the object of all sacrifices and the owner of everything. And then when he was finished his speech, we got ready to pray. We took out our cartels and we started crashing them. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. And the UN representative ran out and said, stop, stop. This is a silent prayer vigil. So we stopped our kirtan, and we all had to sit down in the plaza and chant japa instead of chanting. So we chanted for about an hour, and that was our prayer vigil. And a picture appeared of us in the New York Post, and they referred to him as Swami Krishna. And Prabhupada looked at the picture, and there was a picture of me there with my head down. And he said, oh, you chant like this with your head down? Swamiji said he wanted us to go out and chant in public. We got permission to chant on Sundays in Tompkins Square Park from 2 to 5. We had an old oriental rug that someone had given us, so we rolled it up, and 2 boys carried it on their shoulders. and we took our instruments and walked the 5 blocks to Tompkins Square Park, the boys and the Swami leading the way. People, mostly Puerto Rican wise guys, jeered at us from their stoops. But Swami was unaffected. We were intimidated and scared, but we stayed close to him. We went to the park, and we laid out the rug by the oak tree there. And Swami sat down on the edge of the rug, and he took out this one-headed bongo drum. It was the only drum he had. He had written, when he was uptown, to Mataji Mataji, asking her to send out a Madranga. And he wrote to a godbrother, but nobody sent him a Madranga. But he played this drum like a Madranga with one hand. He was very strong. His health was very good. And he chanted. We had 3 hours to chant. And he chanted for an hour and a half, non-stop, leading the chanting. People gathered around, dozens of people, old Ukrainian ladies, young kids on their bicycles ran right up close to us. And then hippies came with a more interested spirit. And some of them had wooden recorders that they played, and someone had a flute. A guy came by with a saxophone and started playing. And Allen Ginsberg was out, and he came by, and he chanted with us. And a news reporter came from the New York Times and interviewed Allen Ginsberg. He said, "Don't interrupt a man when he's worshiping." We were so thrilled to be outdoors with the Swami chanting, and a few boys got up and danced the Swami step. It wasn't the kind of dancing that they do now in ISKCON. It was a very sedate movement where you just put one foot in front of the other and held your hands up like Lord Chaitanya. So a few boys dancing around, and Sadish or Stanley gave out pamphlets. And the hours went by, and we just chanted and chanted. And people joined us and got into it and were shaking their heads. And Swamiji just rode on top of it all, leading the chanting in a strong voice, thumping on his drum. After an hour and a half, he stopped, and he got up, and he stood by the tree, and he gave a lecture. He said there are 3 levels of consciousness. There's material consciousness, intellectual consciousness, and transcendental consciousness. And this Krishna consciousness is transcendental. It was a short speech, and he spoke in a soft voice. Not many people heard him. He didn't speak too long. Then he sat down again and went for another hour and a half, chanting. And we were the spectacular occasion in the park that day. There was a group in the distance, guys were playing on the conga drums, but we drowned them out. And we celebrated Krishna in a Hare Krishna mantra. When we were finished, about 20 people followed us back to the storefront. It was just like the Pied Piper. They just spontaneously kept with us. They didn't want to leave us. Swamiji let them come into the storefront. And he had sweet rice ready. And he gave out sweet rice in little paper cups. And everybody ate the sweet rice, and he gave an impromptu lecture about the chanting. And after that, for some days, we got more attendance in the meetings from our exposure in the park. And after that, every week we went that Sunday from 2 to 5 and chanted. And we got newspaper coverage. The next day in the New York Times, there was an article with a picture. And it said, "Swami's flock chants in park to find ecstasy." And there was a picture of Brahmananda and Achyutananda dancing, and the Swami sitting on the floor playing a drum. And there was another article in the local hippie newspaper, the East Village Other, and the whole front page had a big photo of Swamiji standing under the oak tree giving a lecture, and big headlines, "Save Earth Now!" exclamation point, and a long article about ISKCON. It said, somebody says God is dead. Somebody says he exists in a sugar cube. But a Swami from India on the Lower East Side says he exists in a chant, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. And went on to describe Swami and our activities. And we read it to him, and he loved it. We had to explain some of the hippie words like acid, pothead, fuzz. But when he heard the explanations, he dug it. He was hit. and he thought it was really good. And then another newspaper article came out shortly afterwards in the National Enquirer, and it was titled, New Indian Religion Gets You Higher Than LSD, and there were pictures of the Swami and the devotees. Prabhupada liked this newspaper coverage so much that he had the 3 newspapers printed up 100 copies each, and he devised a program called the Trustees Program. He said we should each go to a respectable person and show them these newspaper clippings and ask them to become a trustee of ISKCON for $40 a month. They could get his books and any future books that came out. So he deployed us to find respectable people. I didn't know any respectable people except my sister. Her husband worked on Wall Street as a stock analyst, and I lived in Westchester. So I made a date to see them, and I took the newspaper clippings and went up. I rode the train up, and on the way I read Prabhupada's little booklet from India for the first time, the little pale blue book that he printed there, called The Easy Journey to Other Planets. And I had a miraculous experience reading it, the highest ecstasy I ever had reading Prabhupada's books before or since. The spiritual world opened to me, and I saw the light of the planets in the spiritual world, and I read it with complete submission. And I got high reading it and believing that Krishna was the truth, and that Krishna consciousness was the only way. So when I arrived at my sister's, I was really fired up and transcendental, but I wasn't a good preacher. I was really fanatic. I preached to her strong. I said, these bodies are just lumps of flesh and blood, and we shouldn't use sex except to have children, and we shouldn't eat meat, and we shouldn't smoke. And I told her about the Swami and how wonderful he was, and she said, oh, Stevie, now you're into another thing. Because I used to get into things and then get out of them. I used to be an Elvis Presley fan, and then I quit that. Then I was a rock and roll fan, and then I quit that. Then I was a Brooklyn Dodger fan, and then I quit that. And then I got into jazz. So she thought, this is just another phase for you, another kick, and you'll give it up. But I didn't give it up, and I preached to her, and she was a little uneasy and unsubmissive. I was so fanatical. Then her husband came home, Tommy, and then I made the pitch for $40 a month. Look at the newspaper clippings. And they looked at them, and they weren't so impressed, even by the New York Times, the references to LSD. And they said, definitely no, we're not going to become trustees. We're not going to give $40 a month. So when I saw their finality, I looked at my watch and I said, all right, I'm going to leave now. My sister got alarmed, and she said, wait a minute, we listened to your preaching about ISKCON. Now let's be normal people and just talk about other things. I said, no, I can't. If you don't want to become trustees, I have nothing to say. And I got up to leave. My brother-in-law drove me to the train station. On the way, I told him, this isn't fanatical. This is called transcendental loving service. And he said, yeah. And I got back on time. Swamiji was still up. He hadn't gone to bed. And I told him, Swamiji, I failed to make trustees of my sister and brother-in-law. And he was happy with me. He said, that's all right, we tried. And I've never seen my sister since. So those are memories from the summer of 1966. As I said, this presentation will be first seen by an audience around June of 1960, June of 2060. But the 50th anniversary year continued, and Krishna consciousness movement continued from 1966 to the winter. We made a record of the happening label of Prabhupada and the voice chanting. He said,
Awaz.
then in December, Prabhupada started
Speaker.
getting letters from Laguna in California, starting a temple in San Francisco. He thought seriously of going there. He said that Laguna had told him the hippie movement is even bigger in California than in New York. They had arranged something called a mantra rock dance. with rock bands playing, and Prabhupada would be chanting with Allen Ginsberg. Ramananda had expressed it best. He said, "We were shocked to hear that Swamiji would leave. We thought that Krishna consciousness would always stay on the Lower East Side and never leave, never go beyond. What to speak of leaving New York City? We thought this was it, that it would stay here eternally. And that was our idea, that the Hare Krishna movement would always stay at 26th Avenue and never leave. So we even came to Prabhupada and expressed our displeasure at the idea of his leaving, and we thought that the devotees in San Francisco didn't know how to take care of him. We didn't like the idea of the mantra rock dance. And he patiently explained to us that his mission went beyond New York City, and he had a desire to spread it all over the world. And so we were pacified, and he left us. He sent us a letter saying that I know you're missing me, but there are two understandings of the spiritual master. One is called Vaku and one is called Vani. Vaku is the personal association and the Vani is the teachings. The teachings are more important. So just follow my teachings and I will be with you. This pacified us. But actually, here we are observing the 50th anniversary of ISKCON. The fact is, ISKCON has grown in 50 years from a one temple movement to a movement that is huge, spread all over the world with many temples. Millions of books have been distributed, and there are now hundreds and thousands of devotees. Krishna consciousness is very influential in the world. So Prabhupada would like to say that those were happy days in 1966, and they certainly were. But these are happy days now in 2016. And we have lived to see the movement grow into a worldwide religion.
Okay, see you next week.